You're listening to Why We Do What We Do. Welcome to Why We Do What We Do. I am your in awe host, Abraham.
And I'm your eighth wonder, Shane.
We're a psychology podcast. We talk about all the things that people do and the science behind it and understanding psychology things. And we sort of are a history podcast and maybe today more than ever.
Yeah, and I think this is going to be a lot of fun because, you know, I think humans are curious creatures and we are easily awed by things.
Sure.
Like celestial bodies and all that. But nature in itself is very beautiful and things that humans do are very beautiful. And so we're going to talk a little bit about those things that make us wonder.
Yes. Yeah. Very well put. Yeah. Sometimes the things that we talk about involve making lists. This is a list of lists, if you will.
Yeah. Oh, my gosh. And they're all wonderful.
Indeed. Before we get into our topic for today, if you're joining us for the first time, thank you. So happy that you are here. Looking forward to having you around for this and many other episodes. If you've been with us, we recently wrapped up several episodes talking about addiction. We are now changing course. So
Yes.
Just as a warning, we're not talking about addiction today.
I mean, unless you're addicted to awe, then...
Inspiration,
yeah. I think that then, or mystery even, ooh, because there's some of that in here too.
There you go.
If you're addicted to those things, then here we go. This is the episode for you.
Yes, and if you would like to support the show, you can join us on Patreon, pick up some merch, leave us a rating and a review, subscribe, send us nice emails. You can start a list of your top 7 favorite Why We Do What We Do episodes. But I'd also like to wish you, because it is June 12th, happy Crowded Nest Awareness Day.
Mm-hmm. It's also Ghost in the Machine Day. That sounds scary.
Deus Ex Machina, as they say. I guess that's
don't
God
like
in
it.
the machine, but... International Cachaca Day. Cachaca?
Yes, Cachaca. That's how I read it.
Okay.
It's also International Falafel Day. Big fan of that. Love that, actually.
Oh, yes, please. Good. All right. It is Little League Girls Baseball Day. Cool.
Yeah, because it's Little League Baseball Week. We'll talk about that in a second. It's Loving Day. Ooh.
Okay. It's National Automotive Service Professionals Day. For those people who professionally service our automotives, thank you.
Yeah, shout out to my brother. He owns a business doing that. So it's also National Peanut Butter Cookie Day. So get your forks out so you can make sure you get that specific pattern on it.
That is also one of the best cookies.
Yeah.
It is a Red Rose Day.
Ah, yes. And it is Superman Day.
Importantly, it is World Day Against Child Labor. That is something we are against in this part of the world.
Well, unless you're in Arkansas right now. Apparently, they just passed some laws on that. So maybe, I don't know, get involved politically to prevent that from happening.
Yeah.
It is Community Health Improvement Week. I like that. Take care of your members, your neighbors.
Totally. It is National Clay Week.
Ah, for all the artists out there.
Clay Aiken?
Yeah, Clay. I hope so.
Oh, that kind of clay.
Well, that too. I mean, he's technically an artist, so that's fine.
Fair.
It's National Email Week. Ugh.
I interpret that to mean end it forever.
Yeah.
The scourge that is email.
The scourge that is email. Boo.
It is National Little League Baseball Week, as you mentioned. So, so specifically Little League Girls Baseball Day for today, but the whole week, I think, has probably multiple days because it is Little League Baseball Week.
Yeah. And celebrate because it's such a great time. I played Little League Baseball and it was a blast. It is National Pet Wedding Week. Yeah. I don't know what to say to that.
It is Shampoo Week. Sure.
Yeah. Wash your hair. It is ALS Awareness Month.
Okay. It is National Candy Month.
Yeah. Love that. It is International Surf Music Month.
Okay. Importantly, and I hope that we said this last week, and I don't remember now, but it is Pride Month.
Yes, absolutely. So happy Pride, folks. And here's to an uncomfortable month for every homophobe out there.
That's what I was just going to say.
Oh, sorry. I didn't even take that from you.
No, that's okay. I just saw that meme yesterday. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, that was good.
It is also, FYI, Loneliness Awareness Week, just in case.
Oh, yeah. Important. That's actually very, very important.
Yeah. And then National Business Etiquette Week. So be etiquette-al in your businesses.
Yeah, be etiquette-al.
That's a word.
I'm glad that we have a high, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a high academic rigor when we're talking about this episode, when we use words like etiquette.
Welcome to, vocabulary.
Yeah.
Words that we make up. So as I said, it is June 12th, and that means that we're actually not terribly far off from Seven Wonders Day, which may not surprise you if you're thinking about numbers and math, is on July 7th, which is 7/7.
Sure.
It's actual Seven Wonders Day. So we're a little ahead, but we're close. We're almost there.
Close enough. So you may have heard of the phrase, the Seven Wonders of the world, and I know that I have historically tried to look up what the Seven Wonders are and found that there are several more than seven.
True.
I don't know if you've had that experience, but
yes,
we all might have an idea of what we think the Seven Wonders are, but I think it's worth talking about what are currently identified as the Seven Wonders, why are there seven, the controversy around the Seven Wonders. It's actually very interesting and a lot more complicated than just going, yeah, that's wonderful.
Indeed. Yeah, there's kind of a lot to talk about. And we thought it'd be fun to just sort of talk about the Seven Wonders, where this idea came from, where it has gone since its inception, and as you mentioned, some of that controversy. So let's go ahead and just dive right into our topic here with the background here, because this is so much history that we're going to be unpacking.
Yes.
That's kind of all this is, really. It's just a discussion around history, and I guess how we choose to make lists about historical things.
Yeah.
The Seven Wonders list, as it is, first was assembled in a Greek poem by, I'm going to pronounce this, Antipater, maybe, of Sidon around 100 BCE. And this was really at the time kind of a celebration of Greek Mediterranean stuff for the most part. Mostly just Greek stuff. And people are going to say, what about Herodotus and all that? And we're going to get to that in a second. But the first one that we're pretty clear that was assembled at the time that it was written was this Greek poet here, Antipater. And so the Seven Wonders that he assembled in the poem included the walls of Babylon, the statue of Zeus at Olympia in Greece, the hanging gardens of Babylon, the Colossus of Rhodes, the pyramids, and finally the tomb of King Mausolus of Halicarnassus, which is in today's Turkey. And in fact, that king's name, King Mausolus, is where we get the word mausoleum.
Oh,
because that's what that was. Yeah.
Super interesting. I'm surprised that the Seven Wonders didn't include olives or hummus or feta, because those things are wonderful. I wish people appreciated them more.
Fair.
So let's talk about Herodotus for a second. So Herodotus was an ancient Greek historian considered to be the father of specifically of history as a field of study. So like without him, you wouldn't have historians. So you can thank Herodotus for those folks, for like Dan Carlin and all that.
No one would have come along to talk about history if it hadn't been for Herodotus.
Yep. Him and only him.
That's right. But he was at least the first here. And really, there were lots of people who had talked about history before him. But when they talked about history, they often had an agenda, and it was an allusion to things like gods. They would talk about word of mouth things. And instead, Herodotus took this very novel and unique approach to specifically seek out verifiable evidence and firsthand sources and accounts to enumerate the details of historical events and things that had happened throughout history. And so that's sort of what his unique contribution to it was, is like, let's make history objective.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, I don't know about that. But that was how
seems fishy.
Yeah, that's right. That's how he kicked off what became the field of study, is by approaching it objectively and empirically as much as could be done.
Yeah. And he was particularly interested, at the time at least, of the relatively recent history of the Greco-Persian Wars, sometimes just called the Persian Wars, but that's where he started his focus. It was like kind of looking at the timeline and the history around the Greco-Persian War.
And he was the person who actually wrote about the Battle of Thermopylae, which we talked about quite a bit in our 300th episode that was about the Spartans and covered the Battle of Thermopylae.
Yeah.
He wrote about that. He was sort of the one who I think helped cement that event in history clearly.
Yeah. He also wrote about the seven wonders of the world in what some historians think was maybe a tourist guide for travelers, not just kind of like saying like these things are wonderful, but it was more like, hey, you should stop at these places. It's kind of like a map to the stars, but like BCE.
Yeah. Some people described this as like the Greek tourists' bucket list of like places to go, sort of thing. And so one thing that at least occurred to me that I've thought about pretty much as long as I can remember hearing about the seven wonders of the world was why seven? And at least initially, I sort of reasoned to myself that it must be there are only seven. There's really only seven things that are wonders. And we as a human species have definitively identified what those seven were based on some specific criteria of what should be called a wonder.
Right.
That's actually not why.
Weird.
Yeah, it may surprise you. It seems like the consensus is that probably the number seven was chosen because this was important to the Greeks, as it represented, I think there were several cultural things that had seven being an important embedded number for them, but it also represented the known bodies of our solar system. There was the ones that they knew about, at least, included the sun, the moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, and Jupiter, and Saturn. Brought them to seven. Apparently, Earth didn't count, but those were the seven that I saw as being the ones that they were aware of, and therefore, at least one of the reasons seven was an important number.
Yeah. Now, the list of wonders that we now call the seven wonders of the ancient world were attributed to Herodotus, but they were actually assembled during the Middle Ages, so it wasn't him that came up with it. They were kind of put together later in those Middle Ages.
Or like maybe he did write about them, but he didn't actually assemble them explicitly into a list, but the list was compiled during the Middle Ages. Hard to say.
Right.
But that's why I said, the first actually assembled list that was like assembled at the time was that Antipater sounds weird. I'm going to say Antipater.
Yeah.
Because Herodotus was actually a few centuries before that. But again, that list wasn't assembled until many centuries later. So one thing that you'll notice from this list that, again, I actually didn't know until I was looking a lot of the stuff up is that the original seven wonders were all like human constructed monuments.
Yeah.
They were all objects that were created by people and structures, and these were all structures and monuments in the ancient world. But I thought that like it could have included naturally occurring things, but at least this original seven was all human created things.
Right. And on top of the fact that they were all human created things, they were also just stuff that seemed important to the Greeks at the time, like what they knew about or cared about. So specifically the stuff that we're going to kind of list in just a moment, they're all going to be kind of in the same Mediterranean area. When we say the seven ancient wonders of the world was just Greek. Right? Like, that's like kind of like it was not outside of that.
At least a Herodotus, yeah.
At least a Herodotus. And again, I think that goes back to kind of like saying, well, this is why it was more so like a tourist guide than it was like an actual accounting of the wonders of the world, because it was so uniquely local.
Yeah.
Compared to, the known world. I mean, they knew more about the world beyond that. They knew about other planets too. So like, they just were like, no, you're going to visit here. These are going to be the important places for you.
Yeah. These are the cool, wonderful things that we know about that are around us. And so you should check them out. And so we'll just go ahead. We'll go ahead and go through the list. I will say it's important to know, at least as far as I can tell from most of the reading I was doing, a lot of these were largely included because they were tall, particularly for at this time in history where tall things that were like created structures were a little bit more difficult to come by because they either wouldn't last very long or they didn't have the engineering capabilities for them.
Right.
It seems to be why they were included in the list. Why we include ads is because they give us money, but it's begrudgingly. Okay, so we're back. Maybe that was an advertisement for visiting one of the seven wonders, but let's go ahead and run through our list. We'll give a little bit of information about each of these things.
The first is the Lighthouse of Alexandria. Stood 380 feet tall, or 117 meters, and it stood for 1,602 years. So solid structure.
Yeah, that's a decent amount of time right there. That's most buildings that I'm aware of, at least in the United States, have not. Most of them are gone at this point. There's a few that are still around since its inception, but
exactly.
All right, another one, as we had mentioned, was the mausoleum at Halicarnassus. Now, I hope I'm saying that at least moderately correctly. This is a structure that was 135 feet tall, which is 41.1 meters for the rest of the world. I mean, this one stood for an impressive 1,755 years, nearly 2 centuries. This building stood. That is so many generations of people.
That's a lot of people would have seen that. That's pretty impressive. There's the Colossus of Rhodes, which was about 107 feet tall or 32.6 meters, and that stood for 56 years. But some historians actually dispute the fact that this could have existed, as evidence is scarce on that specific thing, and the descriptions of it make it seem very unlikely to have been able to be built as described. So basically, it sounds like it was around and it could have been there, but like maybe it wasn't, because it sounds like it was maybe like the result of lore.
Essentially, the narrative was that an earthquake destroyed it. But so this was a very large statue of a person. And in some instances, the person is straddling like a harbor. So you would sail your boat between this person's legs. But one of the things that people point out is like they really didn't have. First of all, it'd be hard to find a harbor that was that narrow and that deep, and like that a boat could go through it and you could put a statue on top of it. And also that they had the engineering capability to build such a sound structure in that way seems pretty unlikely. So historians, some suggest like if it did exist, probably wasn't quite as grandiose as described, probably wasn't straddling a river. There are a lot of writings that allude to it. So there's a lot of people who think there's good reason to believe that it did exist, but maybe not just quite in the fantastical way that it was described, as I said.
Yeah, that makes sense. There's also the Temple of Artemis at Ephesus, was 60 feet tall, 18.3 meters, and stood for 194 years. Not too shabby.
Yeah. And then the statue of Zeus at Olympia, this was 39 feet tall, which is 11.9 meters. This stood for also a pretty impressive 855 years, nearly 900 years this was standing. I was thinking, I was like, so these are kind of getting smaller as we go, right? 39 feet tall doesn't sound really tall, but I'm like trying to imagine a 39-foot tall statue. That's pretty big. Like that's a couple of stories of a building. Like that's large.
That's at least several feet taller than I am.
At least, yeah.
There is also the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, which there is no accounted for height, which is another one of those like kind of fun, interesting things that exists out there. But it stood for 374 years. So that was around for some time too.
And then the final 7th one here is the Great Pyramids of Giza. The main one here was 455 feet tall. This is the tallest of all of them. That's 138.7 meters. So quite large here. And this one's actually still standing over 4,500 years later. So over 4,500 years later, this thing is still standing. That is impressive.
Triangles, man. That's what it is. It's all triangles. Triangles are wild.
Yeah. An earthquake's not going to take down a pyramid.
Nope. Earthquakes aren't a match for triangles. We know that. So let's talk a little bit about modern history. Let's bring it up to, at least the 1990s, which is, the most important decade for anybody listening to this podcast, probably. So in the 1990s, the internet was starting to become widespread enough that many people around the world were starting to use it regularly. And so it was connecting people and we were discovering more information. And it was kind of this fascinating thing, poison now, but great at the time.
Arguably still good now, but I there are definitely things about it that are increasingly problematic.
Sure.
So around this time, a Swiss filmmaker named Bernard Weber, as far as I know, he's still around. He kind of acknowledged that original list was like, at this point, thousands of years old. Only one of the original structures was still standing. It was also very Greek-centric. And so he kind of had this idea of like bringing back the Seven Wonders conversation, but this time democratizing it a little bit.
Yeah, so he decided to build a new list, and when he decided to democratize it, it's actually, you can go on and get input, or you could have gone and given input on it for the new Seven Wonders, and the website was called new7wonders.com, which is still up, by the way. I have not looked at it, but I want to look at it like the Space Jam website is, which is still on like an Angel Fire type of website.
Whoa.
I don't know if you've seen like the original Space. Space Jam one.
I don't think I have. The Seven Wonders
You should.
website looks pretty modern. Like, it looks like they've been keeping up to date on it.
Oh yeah.
I don't think it has the fun, like, old school animation that you'd expect from one of those type of websites. But no, it's pretty
Missed
good.
opportunities. Yeah, it's pretty nice. I like that. Okay. So people could actually submit entries via the internet or text message at the time. So like that was a big thing, and that was actually kind of one of the. I think that's actually really fascinating, given the time. That wasn't a thing that people were doing. People would have to write into like magazines and stuff.
Right. Yeah. Everything. There's still a lot of snail mail going on. And so this is around, I think, 1999, 2000-ish is when this opened up for voting. Like, he started working on this, and that's about the time that it really kicked into gear. And so they received over 100 million votes from people around the world. And so they had to go through and tally and count all of those up to get the sort of final winners here. And so they set a date for 7 years in the future, which makes sense, so that they could then announce the outcomes on July 7th, 2007, which is 777. And so from this democratized list of votes, they assembled a new list of wonders of the ancient world. Well, this is just wonders of the world now. And these are still on the theme here of the sort of human created structures, just to keep you in the loop on that.
Yeah, big things. The first one is the Great Wall of China, which is over 5,500 miles or 8,850 kilometers, although a Chinese study estimates nearly 3 times that length. We'll say at the end of the day, 5,500 miles is still greater than 1/5 the circumference of the Earth, which means that that's huge.
Yeah.
That is a very big wall.
Yes.
It's a great wall.
It is. That's a lot of miles right there. That is that is the MAGA dream, right?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's already been done, folks. It's just it's there.
Yeah, just a different continent.
Yeah.
All right. There's another city. Oh, okay. I'm so sorry. I'm going to butcher this name. I'm going to try really hard. Chichen Itza. Or maybe Chichen Itza or Chichen Itza. Probably not that one. I'm going to say Chichen Itza. This is the Mayan city and the Yucatan Peninsula, which includes several structures, but one notable pyramidal building called El Castillo, or the castle. And that stands at 79 feet tall, or 24 meters, and has 365 steps for the 365 days of the year.
There's also Petra in Jordan, which is a city with buildings carved into the sandstone walls, as once a major capital and center for trade. And when you see some of the images, you would say, okay, I know what that is. I've seen that before. And it's just beautiful. It's incredible.
Yeah. Very Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade type vibes going on here. It is pretty amazing. I would be very interested to see this, but that was one that was, as you said, voted on here. One that many people will have heard, and I don't know how much people know about it, but is Machu Picchu. And this is one of the very few pre-Columbian ruins that is still nearly intact. It is an Incan site near Cuzco, Peru. It's high in the Andes Mountains and features agricultural terraces, plazas, temples, and residential areas, and now features a cracked monument that was previously intact, but was partially destroyed thanks to a mistake while filming a beer commercial there. And I think now beer commercials are no longer filmed there, right?
Could you imagine being that person?
Yeah.
That's like, you're responsible for destroying like an important landmark. I could not imagine. I would carry that guilt for the rest of my life.
Right.
Ugh.
They might.
Ooh. Yeah, they might. All right, so there's also the Christ the Redeemer statue, which is a 98-foot tall or 38-meter statue, not including the 26-foot or 8-meter base. It's located in Rio de Janeiro and is the largest Art Deco sculpture in the world. And you for sure know this statue. It's Jesus Christ with his arms out, staring out over the city and over the water.
Yeah, I believe that his arm length is another like 28 feet or something. I don't know. Maybe it's more than that, but like the width of it, that's so tall.
Yeah.
I mean, trying to imagine a 100-foot statue by itself without the additional 26 feet of base that it's standing on, like that is so tall.
Yeah. And putting that on a mountain.
Yeah, that is a giant piece of work there. Whew. Okay. So, and then we have number 6 on our list is the Colosseum in Rome. Again, most people have heard of this. It was 159 feet tall or 48 meters. And then it was several hundred feet around. It's a gigantic ancient stadium for viewing events events and things such as gladiatorial combat. And of course, now mostly serves as a tourist attraction, but impressive that it's still standing. It's been there for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, it's super, super fascinating. And then there's also the Taj Mahal in Agra, India. And this is a gigantic mausoleum that's 240 feet tall or 73 meters. I want to point out something really interesting about this. When you look at this list, there is nothing in the United States. So I think it's super important to point out for everybody who says that we're the greatest nation. We couldn't even build something this tall, which is cool. And then also, there's nothing from Africa either, right? Well, the pyramids. I'm sorry. So let me take that back. So we've got the pyramids. No, the pyramids aren't on this list. The
Great Pyramids they actually took the Pyramid of Giza on this list.
Yeah.
But they also took almost everything out of Europe, too. Like all the... very little remained that was like European at all. But yeah. So
actually nothing. Oh, except for the Colosseum.
Yeah, I think just the Colosseum. But yeah, most of the rest of it.
Nothing in Australia.
It's true. Didn't have the world's largest snake as a wonder of the world.
No.
They needed more permanent stuff.
Yeah, they couldn't just throw spiders in there and be like, yeah, we own this.
The scariest wonder of the world. Somewhere in Africa.
Yeah, all seven are in Australia.
Fair enough. All right. Well, one of the other scary wonders of the world, sadly, is ads. So we mentioned that this is a long-time work of the Swiss filmmaker Bernard Weber, and there's an important misunderstanding here that a lot of people have is in Weber's work, a lot of people think that the UNESCO Heritage Organization had something to do with this new Seven Wonders list. They kind of didn't. Now, Weber did seek consultation from them during the early stages of the project, but UNESCO actually had nothing to do with the designation of these or any other part of the project. He just had some questions and some things to ask them for information. Is probably honestly to like help add some things to the list that he may have forgotten or whatever. They had no link or involvement with the generation or curation of this list at all. And a lot of people were really upset about this list, which we're going to get to in a moment. And they sort of got mad at UNESCO. They're like, what? This isn't us. We didn't do this. So important to note, I think, that they were not directly involved in this.
Right. And I think you pointed out, too, that everything that was on this is a human-made creation. And that's really cool because I think humans can do some really amazing, wonderful things. But there are also very unique and amazing features of the rest of the world that are naturally occurring. And so they went on to create the seven wonders of the natural world that were not human-created phenomena.
Right. And so we'll go ahead and just list those. I think they're of interest for the most part. These are some kind of amazing places around the world that stand out as being unique in one way or another. And the first one is Aurora Borealis. There are other auroras. I know people, particularly in the Southern Hemisphere, will hear that and be like, what about Aurora Australis? Which is definitely a thing. And what you'll see if you go to the South Pole, what you're more likely to do because no one's going to go to the North Pole. But in the South Pole, you can see that aurora. So anyway, the Aurora Borealis in the Northern Hemisphere was listed as one of the seven wonders of the natural world.
Yeah, and that does not include the Aurora Borealis that is centralized specifically in Principal Skinner's kitchen when he was serving Steve Tams to Superintendent Chalmers. So just to be clear on that, too.
Correct. Totally different Aurora Borealis.
Can I see it? No. There's also the harbor of Rio de Janeiro, which is the world's largest natural bay.
Pretty impressive pictures of this.
Yeah, gorgeous.
I feel like the pictures even hardly capture the scope of the whole thing. I kind of want to just look at pictures of this now. But yeah, it is quite amazing looking. Victoria Falls. This is in Africa. This is between Zambia and Zimbabwe. It is so massive and contains so much water that are going over the falls that it can be heard from as far as 25 miles away. The sound of the falls crashing. Yeah, I mean, it is a gigantic, it's kind of like a large crevice in the earth, and into that crevice is pouring just millions of gallons of water.
Yeah, I mean, it's breathtaking, it looks like. So there is Paracutan, which is a Mexican volcano that was nothing but a cornfield. It actually erupted in 1943 and spewed such incredible volumes of lava that it now stands at about 1,300 feet tall as a mountain in the middle of this former cornfield. Just kind of showed up, which is so disruptive.
Yeah. This part of the reason it was added is because it's only like 80 years old, and it was added obviously not within even at the time, like 70 or 60 years old. And it was just this massive transformation of the world's landscape where like from flat fields to gigantic mountain in like a really quick amount of time.
Yeah.
From all the lava. So yeah, horribly destructive. Now pretty culturally important and relevant to the people of the area. I think they were able to turn this into an opportunity.
Yeah, most definitely.
The first and only thing on the list, in any list that is in the United States, is the Grand Canyon. This is a 277-mile long canyon. It is as deep as a mile at its deepest point, which is very, very deep.
Yeah.
And this was, for those of you who don't know, carved out by the Colorado River as it snaked through, and it just over time carved out this layers and layers of rock. So you can actually see, just by standing at the edge of the Grand Canyon, you can see layers of Earth's history through the rock and sediment cores all the way down to where the riverbed currently sits. So it's a pretty amazing sight. I've seen it once and was very, very impressed at this. It is quite amazing to see.
Yeah, I've heard that it's really impressive. I've flown over it, and it's incredible how big it is. But like, I would love to be there on the ground and see it.
It's definitely worth the trip. It is an amazing sight.
Yeah. Speaking of places I've never been to, and probably will never end up at this place, there is a mountain called Mount Everest, or Chomolungma, in the Himalayan mountains on the China-Nepal border. This is 29,032 feet, or about 8,848 meters. It is the tallest mountain in the world by absolute height, not the tallest from base to top. That's really important because I believe the tallest is in the ocean, yeah?
Well, kind of. It pokes out of the ocean. It's in Hawaii. It's Mauna Kea, the mountain in Hawaii. But yeah, from the base to the top, it is the tallest mountain. But the mountain that rises the highest into our atmosphere is Mount Everest. And the reason I wanted to include the other name here is I was looking at this thinking, Everest is a pretty strange name to be in the China, Nepal, Himalayan mountains.
That seems very white.
So this is named after a British explorer, and so that's why I thought it was more relevant probably to include the name known to the Sherpa people that are there, Chomolungma. I'm so sorry for how I'm saying that. I will get better, but I felt like it was more relevant to use the name for the people who are like around that area than some doofus who like wandered around just putting his name on things.
Yeah, that's mine.
Yeah.
The tallest mountain is mine. Yeah, what a dork.
All right, and finally, the seventh wonder of the natural world is the Great Barrier Reef. This is off the coast of Australia, and this is the Great Barrier Reef is the largest known coral reef system in the world, at covering 1,430 miles, which is 2,300 kilometers. Just a massive, massive ecosystem of wildlife, flora, and fauna aquatically, and just really, really beautiful thing. I've also never seen this one in person. I would really, really love to someday. Yeah. Assuming it's still around, if climate change hasn't fully destroyed it at the point I'd be able to see it.
Yeah, absolutely. Or like pollution hasn't bleached it entirely, and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, that too.
When Why We Do What We Do gets really famous and we can start doing tours, we'll do an Australian tour. And so we'll make sure we get down there and we get to do that.
Sweet. I love that.
Yeah, that's going to be great. So there is also a democratized list. So again, we're going to talk about some of the controversies of like the lists that have been established. We realize that some of the lists that have established might be like, specific to information that people might have without knowing about more of the world, but there are other ones that are worth considering. So first is Komodo Island.
There's also the Amazon forest and river,
which is beautiful, it looks like. There's the Iguazu Falls in Brazil and Argentina.
Jeju Island, which is in South Korea.
There's also the Puerto Princesa Underground River in the Philippines.
And Table Mountain, which is in Cape Town, South Africa.
And Ha Long Bay in Vietnam. So those are additional wonders of the natural world that are worth pointing out.
So USA Today also sort of created their own version of the new Seven Wonders of the World. They actually published this just before the other list. So this was published in November of 2006. And so let's go through their list of what they considered Seven Wonders. The first one is Potala Palace. I had to look up a picture of this. That is an amazing structure. It looks like a fortress on top of a mountain. And it is
really
astonishing. Like, it almost looks like a mountain made out of fortress, or like they carved it into the mountain.
Yeah.
I don't know. It is astonishing looking.
It's really, really impressive. There is the old city of Jerusalem as well.
Also very beautiful. The polar ice caps they included, which is cool.
So there is a Marine National Monument Park in Hawaii. I'm going to do my best to say this. It is the Papahānaumokuakea. Papahānaumokuakea.
That sounds pretty good.
That's as close as I'm going to get right now. I think I did pretty okay.
Yeah.
But it's a Marine National Monument in Hawaii.
That's great. This one is kind of interesting. They included the Great Migration of the Serengeti and Masai Mara as one of the wonders.
Interesting. There's also the internet as one of the wonders.
Sure.
Which, I mean, if you think about the impressive infrastructure that has to exist for the internet to work the way it does, I mean, it's a pretty impressive feat.
This is a fair point. That actually is a really good point. I agree. And then the Mayan ruins. I think just generally all Mayan ruins is what they're calling, which fair. Yeah, that's good at that.
Yeah, sure. There's also the 7 wonders of the Muslim world, 7 wonders of the solar system, list of wonders by civil engineers, 7 wonder cities, 7 wonders of the underwater world. I almost read that as 7 wonders of the underworld, and I got real nervous about that. 7 wonders of the industrialized world, and then there's also 7 wonders of specific countries. So this listicle thing that was invented with the 7 wonders of the world exists in all different forms and formats, which makes it a little bit difficult to figure out what the actual 7 wonders of the world might be.
And it kind of gives us, I think, an important insight into understanding that, like, the kind of what they are is up to us. It's up to the list makers, I guess.
It's made up.
It is made up. And it, I think, speaks to some of the controversy that has arisen here because of the outcome. So, first of all, when they created the new 7 Wonders list, both USA Today and the democratized list, they just kind of left off the pyramids of Giza that were one of the longest standing and one of the largest structures in the world. And so Egyptian officials were very unhappy about their pyramids being removed from the list. And they pointed out that Weber, the guy who started the democratized list, had associations with a tour company. And so that they suggested that the whole purpose of the project was to help them make a profit, basically to sort of lend themselves as the definitive world's guide to this. I don't know that there's a lot of merit to that exact argument. It really does feel like, in reading about this, was just kind of a passion project for Weber. But it wouldn't surprise me if several people did try to capitalize on this. I would be surprised if they had remained, if they would have had any arguments about what his links were. If they were like, don't include us on this list, guy. You're just a part of this tour company. I'm like,
Right.
I think I see what's going on here.
I think something that I've learned kind of looking at some discussions around like the pyramids and the Sphinx and stuff like that is that like Egyptian government tends to be very protective of those monuments. Like they're very proud and protective of it. And they should be like totally justified. But like, it's like, they almost get like to like, there's almost like a discussion around like they get very, like I said, press releases and stuff tend to be focused on like the pride and that is like the pride of the country, which I know there's so much more merit to the country too, but like there is that kind of, seems like there's a discussion around that often where it's like, no, the pyramids though, that seems to come up a lot.
Yeah. And they do argue that like they had a problem with the fact that it was a democratized list. They say the 7 Wonders should be curated by historical scholars, not random strangers. And I think, again, I see the sort of 2 sides to that argument. I think on the one hand, you make a good point that like the people who know the most about these wonders and what makes them wonderful are in a good position to establish a pretty well curated list. And on the other, it sort of speaks to like, what do people as a whole find as being valuable around the world that they're interested in.
Right.
If the list had included the pyramids, the narrative probably would have been something like, see, everyone in the world agrees at how important the pyramids are.
Right.
As opposed to saying, don't listen to those rubes, listen to the scholars, our scholars in particular.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I don't know. I think the motives are very clear. And not to say, again, I actually agree with them in a lot of ways that I think that the pyramids of Giza are an an astonishing and incredible feat and deserve our attention and love and admiration and should be protected, and that they should be very proud of them.
Yeah.
And like acknowledging that like some of these arguments just feel a little disingenuous, maybe.
Yeah. It's like they were scorned.
Yeah.
They're
like getting back at their ex.
No, we're important. It's like, nobody's saying you're not important. We're just saying this list is arbitrary. All of these lists are arbitrary.
Yes.
That's, I think, really important to remember in all of this, is that all of these lists are arbitrary. Like, check this out.
Don't worry about the list.
Don't worry about the list. So, like, here's the thing. Like, we noticed, and you may have noticed too, there's no criterion for appearing on any of these lists. It is, do we like this, yes or no? It is going on YouTube and finding a top 10 list of blank. Like, that's what they did. Except they did it like, years ago before we could do that in like with the, YouTube videos and like B-rolls and stuff like that. So they were not picked for any particular reason other than they were people's subjective favorites. Even the worldwide survey was basically a popularity contest generated by about 1% of the world's population. That's, I think, really important to remember. About 1% of the world's population decided what the 7 wonders were.
Right. So, yeah, it's like not that representative, even though it's like hundreds of millions of people at this point. So worth considering that, like, if we were trying to democratize this, we probably could have done better. There are still a lot of people in the world who probably couldn't participate in this, even today, even if they wanted to. Right. So, it's like not exactly the most I think, researched list, if you will.
Right. At all.
And, I think others point out this sort of like, well, who gets to choose? And like, oftentimes it gets left up to people who are in positions of power, who have a particular background, who have a lot of money and influence. And looking back at like the Greeks, for example, who established the original 7 wonders, and I think to be generous to the Greeks and Herodotus, is they were kind of just saying, here's a bunch of cool stuff that we like that's nearby. And like, I think that's like amazing stuff that's within like writing distance is like could have been what that was called instead.
Right.
But they landed on the number 7, and I think that exclusivity made people interested in it. But if you look at a map of the world and you highlight the areas where the 7 wonders exist, it is a like comically embarrassing small tiny footprint of the globe that is occupied by what they called the 7 wonders, right? Like this, it was just this tiny region bordering the Mediterranean. That's it. That's like the whole thing. And so like just not like particularly representative of like what was around the world that they might be interested in. And so like that's another thing people have sort of pointed to as feeling like this is arbitrary, it's dumb, like you shouldn't rely on this list because you're just making lists to make lists. And like to that argument, I kind of say, yep, true.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of what has happened, like almost entirely. I mean, and to that point, like when we start talking about wonders of the world that you might have thought of, I mean, you may be going through this and going, I thought this was. I mean, check this out. Stonehenge was excluded. The Eiffel Tower, the Acropolis, the Parthenon, Hagia Sophia, which is a mosque, Niagara Falls, Timbuktu, the Easter Island heads, like all of these are examples of like things that have been left off of these lists that are also incredibly fascinating and also arguably more interesting. Like the Colosseum, super fascinating, super interesting. We know how it was built. We know what was done there, but like nobody knows a thing about Stonehenge.
Right.
Like that thing is weird.
Yeah, exactly.
To me, that's more wonder.
Yeah. No, that's exactly it. Is like why did those things get left off and other things got included? And it's like, why isn't the deepest freshwater lake in the world or the largest freshwater lake in the world on that list? Why isn't the largest inland saltwater lake on the list? Yeah, why isn't the saltiest ocean on the list? What about all these other human created structures that are really impressive and amazing that were like feats of engineering? There's certain bridges in the world that are like
roller coasters.
Yeah, certain roller coasters, and like they had to invent new engineering to like build some of these structures that are around. Like that's how, and they're very unique. Like the engineering is like only been used for that thing, like new math and all that. Like it's crazy how much has gone into that. So
the International Space Station, like that is an incredible. It's a small city.
Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah. It's a remarkable achievement that people even got that into space. So, like, yeah, the criteria seems to be what do people know about and what's like large or very cool looking seems to be kind of what made the list.
Sure.
And not to say that those aren't reasons to include something, but just saying that I think, as we've been trying to point out here, it's just arbitrary. There's nothing special about the number 7 or linking things to the adjective of wondrous. There's no standards. And like that being said, like, let's just consider a lot of people find joy in putting together travel bucket lists. A lot of people find joy in ranking things, and putting a cap on a list of things like 7 invites exclusivity, as I mentioned. It sort of said, like, these are the things we get to include, which means that there, by definition, has to be things that are excluded. And so then a lot of people have stake on getting their thing on the list. And they're very happy when it makes it on the list. Right. They're very upset when it doesn't. But they kind of like to make that exclusive list. We kind of like to rule things into categories and out of other categories. And it's just a thing that people have done because our language affords categorization, and because we kind of just do it, and we do it a lot. Like, you can find top 10 lists, top 20 lists, top 5 lists, top 100 lists of everything you can imagine all over the place now. And even before the internet, I think people have been making similar lists and sort of going through rankings of that sort. I mean, honestly, if you even just think about awards are a form of ranking. You know, a gold medal award is ranking someone as performing, best versus silver versus bronze in athletic events, or all these award ceremonies for music and television and movies. Like, those are all different versions of ranking systems. We've been doing it for a long time. We seem to enjoy that sort of thing. And there's a long tradition in human history of creating lists of things and ranking things. And so, like, it's kind of not surprising that people would do it. And, like, it is a totally arbitrary thing.
Right, absolutely. I think that's the most important thing. It's completely arbitrary. Super fascinating stuff that maybe you don't know about. Super fascinating stuff that maybe you've never learned about or like been exposed to. And it's cool to kind of keep up with this stuff, but it's not the definitive list. It's simply not. And I think that's important to remember when it comes to all this. It's entirely made up.
Yeah, maybe honestly, go out and make your own 7 wonders list, and like, that's great. I'm happy to hear it. Reach out to us.
Email
us know
us.
What it is.
Yeah. Email us what your 7 wonders list is. I would love to know what yours is.
Yeah.
Mine definitely includes, the Killers' When We Were Young song. I think it's a great wonder of the world.
So you can reach us on social media or email us directly at info@wwd.wwd.podcast and let us know about your 7 wonders list. And honestly, if we like it, we will read it on the show as a part of listener mail. In fact, we might read lots of them. Just send them in. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, I would love that. Please send them in.
Yeah. Is there anything you would like to add or anything that I forgot before we get to some credits and recommendations?
That feels good. I feel like that was just a fun episode where it's like, why did we do it? Because we like lists. Like, that's how we ended up doing that. I think that's amazing.
I love that. That you exactly summarized exactly it. I do think that we skipped an ad break we're supposed to take, maybe.
Well, here it is.
Okay, let's go ahead and I think you closed it out pretty well. Is that why the 7 wonders? Because people like making lists of things, and they like the number 7 because they didn't know any better. People often say the 8th wonder of the world. That means as much as saying the 7th wonder of the world or the 10th or the 100th. Who cares? It's like, make a list that includes that one as number 7, or make a list of 10, or make a list of 1,000. Go nuts, have fun. That's the whole point of this. Is just have fun.
That's it.
Yeah. I do like to give credit where credit is due to the people who help make this show. That is my team of people, writing and fact checking from Shane, Jess, and myself, audio engineering and production from the wonderful Justin, and our social media coordinator is Emma Wilson. Of course, if you, as I mentioned before, if you would like to join us and supporting the show, there's a lot of ways you can do that. You can buy some merch from us. That's physical stuff that you can then have. You exchange your money, you get a thing in return, and it says our podcast name on it, and everyone's like, oh, that guy listens to podcasts, or that person, I should say, listens to podcasts. What a genius they are.
Yep.
And just looks really cool. So that's the thing you can do. You can also leave us a rating and review wherever you listen to podcasts. Make sure you subscribe so you hear all of our podcasts, because, I mean, they're just all good, and every one of them is better than the last one. So that's just the way that we do things.
That's true. That's accurate.
And of course, you can join us on Patreon. If you go there, you get behind the scenes content, extra stuff, early ad-free releases of episodes, all kinds of goodies. So if you do that, then I will also read your name, because here are people who have made that leap and have joined us on Patreon, and we really appreciate their generosity. That is Mike M, Megan, Mike T, Justin, Kim, Joshua, Brad, Stephanie, Olivia, Brian, Ashley, Kiara, and Michelle. Thank you all very much for continuing to be with us on this the show that we do.
Y'all are the best.
Yeah.
We love you.
We like to recommend some things. If you haven't heard this before, you're going to hear a little musical number, and then we're going to tell you some stuff that we like. So let's do it.
Recommendations.
All right, so I'm going to recommend a show. And this show is bizarre, but I have a bizarre sense of humor. And so I really appreciate people that like take chances and do weird things. And this show is called John Mulaney Presents Everybody's in LA. So the premise of this show is that it was 6 episodes. That's it. They were all done live as an hour-long live Netflix streaming special.
Okay.
Every episode had a topic. And what John Mulaney would do, if you're familiar with John Mulaney and his stand-up, he would be like the talk show host that would kind of walk through like interviews with people, asking them what they feel about like that certain thing. He would take callers, like live callers would call in. And my favorite part is like it was self-deprecating throughout. Like he would even say, this is the weirdest thing that anybody, this show is so strange.
That's fun.
Yeah, it's so fun. So they'll do skits, they'll have live music on the shows. And like I said, there's only 6 episodes, but the first episode had Jerry Seinfeld, a wildlife advocate, and Ray J. They had St. Vincent perform. Will Ferrell came in and was like doing like a skit on there. And they interviewed like people in the community in LA and basically just talk about LA the whole time. The second episode was about palm trees, and they brought in an environmentalist who like advocated for not planting palm trees because they cost so much, they take so much water and they're so costly.
Let's go to Florida.
Andy Samberg was on there, Gabrielle Iglesias, like Jon Stewart was on that one, Warren G performed.
Wow.
The third episode, Fred Armisen, and interviewed a bunch of like LA punks, which is cool.
Wow.
And then I think Joyce Manor played. Patton Oswalt was on that list or on that episode. And it's just like, that's every episode. It's just like this weird mishmash of all these people that are there. Richard Kind is like his co-host, which is like hilarious. Like he's like his Andy Richter on the show. And it's just great. It's just a weird, strange thing. And like, it's just, they know they're like, oh, we're only doing 6 episodes. That's it. We're done. And they're just leaving it at that, which is a lot of fun.
Huh. All right. So this is John Mulaney Presents Everybody's in LA on Netflix. Very fun.
Uh-huh. So funny.
This is kind of sheer coincidence, but I didn't end up choosing this because of the topic. So I'm recommending a board game, and this is a board game called Seven Wonders. It is essentially based on the 7 wonders of the ancient world, but it's a card drafting game. Basically, you get a hand of cards, choose one, pass it to your left, and you just are sort of collecting sets of cards. Pretty easy game for people who really aren't into games. There is a more recent one that is a very streamlined version of that I think makes it very easy for people who are not like traditionally into, or not traditionally, but I mean into like the board game hobby, as it were, called 7 Wonders Architects. And that one's like very straightforward and not a lot of rules, pretty easy to pick up, and it streamlines the whole thing. And in that version, you're specifically, I mean, in the original version, you're building a wonder, but in this one, you're building a wonder. Like you have the pieces of it and you like get to spend resources to assemble the wonder. In the original version, you have like, you just dedicate resources to it, but you don't actually like make anything. But in Architects, you actually build the wonder, which is pretty cool. So they're just really good games. Yeah. They go up to 7 players, as you might imagine. So they have a lot of people in them. They're just good games. So if you are, honestly, even people who love board games as a hobby tend to like these games. So if you're new to games or old to games, or you're interested in the 7 Wonders, or even if you're not, they're good games to pick up. 7 Wonders and 7 Wonders Architects. I think that's everything I have to say. Thank you so much for recording with me today, Shane. Thank you, everybody who is listening. I think that's all I have to say about this. So I'm going to say this is Abraham.
And this is Shane.
We're out.
See ya.
You've been listening to Why We Do What We Do. You can learn more about this and other episodes by going to www.wwdpodcast.com. Thanks for listening, and we hope you have an awesome day.